Director here at Kennedy Space Center. Tom?
Hi, good afternoon. So welcome to Kennedy Space Center. I know you've already been traveling around here, and I know you'll finish up the day with a great tour to Atlantis, and I'll talk about that at the end. So what I'm going to talk to you about is what we've been doing at Kennedy Space Center since the end of the shuttle program. So a lot of people thought at the end of the shuttle program that Kennedy Space Center was closing because they didn't see any launches, nothing was really seemingly happening out here. But we were doing a lot of work to get us prepared for the next generation of space flight. And so we'll see that as we go through the presentation here. There's been a lot of work happening, a lot of activity going on, and now we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. So we'll start off with can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, I would use the microphone, but I tend to probably project more than anything else. So the NASA mission and vision, to summarize, we want to go explore space and understand better what's happening here on Earth so that we can make Earth a better place to live in a nutshell. And so ultimately we're here to benefit humankind with the activities we're doing, and we'd like to think we're doing a pretty good job at that. So from KSC, to get to space, there's really only a couple of places on Earth that you can get to space. Obviously KSC is one of them, and our vision right now is to become, and we think we are now, the world's preeminent launch complex for government and commercial space flight to enable the world to explore and access space. And we'll show how we've transitioned the Kennedy Space Center from being a government-only installation during the shuttle program and before to being what we are now calling a multi-user spaceport. And we think we've been successful in that endeavor. So as a part of what we're doing here at Kennedy Space Center, we have a number of programs and projects that are housed here at Kennedy. Launch Services Program, Commercial Crew, Ground Systems Development and Operation, and then Exploration and Technology. And we'll go through each one of those a little bit to let you know what the work is that we're doing here at Kennedy. Ultimately, our longer-term goal, not our eventual goal, our really, really long-term goal is, right, Star Trek, of course, everybody wants to be exploring to other planets and going to, but we have to get to an intermediate spot first. And so we've chosen Mars. And that's been our goal really for a while now, but we've done a lot of work to get us to that point. The space launch system that we're developing, along with other international countries, along with the International Space Station, all of those things are enabling us to learn how to live and work in space. You've seen the pictures, it looks fun floating in space, doing all the things that they're doing, flinging food in each other's face, to kind of showcase the how microgravity works. But space is hard, and people don't really understand how hard it is. If you think on the ground, you want to screw a screw in, you just take your screwdriver and start screwing that screw in. In space, you're not standing on anything, so even the simple act of turning a screwdriver, all of a sudden you're flipping around the other way if you're not properly anchored. So as we've learned over the history of space flight, we have developed tools and techniques to allow us to work better in space. But now, getting to Mars, that's a 2+ year endeavor to go there and come back. So we have to learn how to literally live in space for long periods of time. So there's been a lot of work going on, both in the United States and internationally, to understand how that works. So to get us there, we have a 4-phase approach. We've been doing a lot in near-Earth orbit, International Space Station, the shuttle program, over the last 30 years, learning what it means to be in space, again, and for longer durations. But now we're poised to move beyond low Earth orbit using the Space Launch System. So that will be flying late 19 is the current planned flight, and that will form the basis for the capabilities that allow us to get to the moon and beyond, to force us to learn deeper and deeper into space. Because if you're driving across the country or flying, sooner or later you're going to be able to touch back down again. If you're flying to Mars, once you leave, you're there for 2 years. So you have to learn how to be independent. There's no stopping at a gas station. There's no, jumping into a hospital or anything like that. Everybody has to be able to work to do that. So the phases allow us to learn more and more as we go deeper into space from Earth. And so that's the work that we're doing there, and as a part of that, we're partnering with a number of countries, with commercial companies, again, to develop those tools and techniques that allow us to move beyond low Earth orbit. One of our premier programs here at Kennedy is the Launch Services Program. Launch Services Program is the NASA program that basically enables government satellites, NASA research satellites, and others to get to space. So they have a group of folks here that manage procurements that, and also technical information with launch vehicles to ensure that when like NOAA works with us, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, other federal agencies, and all the NASA payloads come through Launch Services Program, they find the correct ride for that payload to space, whether it's low Earth orbit, geosynchronous, or exploration beyond. So a number of the satellites you've seen launched from Kennedy Space Center were managed by the Launch Services Program. And here you see the next 2 years worth of launches, starting with our Tracking and Data Relay satellite, and eventually ending in 2018 with a cloud sensing payload that allows us to understand how our atmosphere is changing as the Earth is warming, and everything in between. You can see they manage launches anywhere from here at Kennedy Space Center to Kwajalein. So all of the US-based type launch sites, they manage that, the satellites that leave from those. Commercial Crew Program is one that was instituted about 6 years ago to develop a commercial capability to get to low Earth orbit, specifically to buy rides to the International Space Station. I'm sure if you've been keeping up, you've seen that the current providers for that are SpaceX and Boeing. And what the Commercial Crew Program has done is develop the requirements and the rules and all that allows us to launch our astronauts on these commercial launch vehicles. So the big difference between what we've done in the past and what we're doing now, in the past, NASA was completely responsible for requirements to design, to operations of the launch vehicle and the crew and the carrier of the crew. But now we have turned the operations side over to commercial companies. Main reason for that is they're able to work more innovatively and do things a little bit more efficiently than we as the government are. I'm a government employee, I can admit that. So Boeing CST-100, they call it the Starliner, and here you see some of the testing that's been done, anywhere from parachute testing to ensure the astronauts make it back safely, to crew simulators to allow them to learn how to fly the capsule. And you can see some of the ergonomic work that's going on here to ensure that astronauts can operate the CST-100 properly, to the work that's going on here at Kennedy Space Center, which is the manufacturer of the CST-100 spacecraft. So a lot of activity happening with Commercial Crew with SpaceX, and similar type activities with the Crew Dragon. I said SpaceX before, Boeing, sorry. Now with Commercial Crew with SpaceX, the Dragon, they're doing similar kind of activities, from building the shell of the spacecraft. All of them are working on life support systems and working on all of the aspects from launch to on-orbit operations to splashdown or landing of the crew, depending on which system. And again, we're developing the requirements for that and working with them to ensure they meet our requirements, but they're basically responsible for the design and manufacture of the spacecraft. International Space Station, obviously we're still flying that. Right now the United States is committed through 2024. I'm sure that will be extended again. That's not a policy statement, in case anybody's taking notes. That's just my speculation as Joe NASA. But it's a great capability. A lot of countries have participated in that and continue to participate in that. And it has become a fantastic research platform for a number of different activities to allow us to learn, again, not only how to work in space, but as well creating products, medicines, things like that end up benefiting us back on Earth. So a lot of really neat things have happened with ISS since it's been in orbit. Ground Systems Development and Operations Program is the program that has implemented the upgrades to the center as a whole. So the clear focus for them has been preparing for the launch of the Space Launch System. So the visible things to most folks are the changes in the launch pads and the vehicle assembly building. And we've built a giant mobile launcher, which you'll see a picture of in just a minute, which allows us to assemble and roll the Space Launch System out to the launch pad. But there's also been a lot of other activity that's gone on center that they have helped us, the center basically prepare for the next 50 years. So some of the not, seemingly very interesting things are things like water lines, power distribution systems, sewer lines, all things that help us be effectively a small city out here. Those things are all 60 years old. So over the last 7 years, GSDO has been upgrading those systems, doing replacements, preparing us for the next 50 years of space flight. So while we are a 50-year-old, almost 60-year-old space center, we have, in many cases, brand new infrastructure to help us carry forward into the next 50 and 60 years. So that's been a big deal. The Orion and Space Launch System programs are also doing work here. You see in this picture the Orion module, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the EM1 being prepared for its final assembly. That's the Exploration Mission 1, again launching in 2019. So that work's going on in the Operations and Checkout building. See an on-orbit concept of that integrated with the propulsion module from the European Space Agency. And then here you see an artist's concept of the mobile launcher with the Space Launch System on it, on Launch Complex 39B. So again, all that, the mobile launcher has been built, the components of the Space Launch System have been designed and are being built now in various parts around the country. And again, the Orion work is going on here at Kennedy Space Center, so it's pretty cool. Here you see an artist concept of the Space Launch System versus the Space Shuttle. Space Shuttle, 184 feet tall. I'm sorry, I can't translate that in meters today. I should. The first incarnation of the Space Launch System will be able to carry 70 tons to low Earth orbit. Phase 2 of that will be able to carry 105 tons. And we're also developing a version that is able to carry 130 tons without crew on it to low Earth orbit. So it's a Saturn V class vehicle being able to carry people and cargo to space. So a lot of work going on to make that happen here and around the country. In the vehicle assembly building, there's been a significant amount of work. The outside of the building still looks the same because it's always going to look like that. That's one of our icons of the Kennedy Space Center. But interior, we've gone through a significant amount of work to prepare us again for Space Launch System. So what you see here in this picture is a really neat view of the platforms that are inside the vehicle assembly building. So as we're assembling, and the same basic principle worked for Saturn that was applied to Shuttle and is now being done for Space Launch System, where these platforms are all movable. If you look, you can see these rails right here. They slide out on the rails. The platforms come together, and it gives you an entire working space around the launch vehicle to allow you to safely work as the vehicle is being prepared for flight. The interesting thing about this is, you see kind of a little, what looks like a little insert here. Those are inserts in the platform. So if the mold line, they call it the outer mold line of the vehicle changes, so the profile, they can remove those platforms and build new ones, or the inserts, instead of having to rebuild entire platforms. So it's a pretty innovative way to deal with what we know are changes coming to the design of the Space Launch System. And there you kind of see, again, an artist's rendering of what that looks like inside the vehicle assembly building. As I think it's actually being assembled right there. You can see a little gap between what is Orion and the top of the Space Launch System launch vehicle. So again, a lot of work going on to prepare us for the next round of space flight here from the Kennedy Space Center, or at least the government space flight. In addition to that, here you can see a picture of the mobile launcher, and it has been built and is being outfitted for SLS. And 39B, you see here, has actually changed completely. If any of you have ever seen a shuttle launch either live or on TV, you saw there's a whole lot of stuff on the launch pad, structures coming up from the launch pad. We went with what's called a clean pad concept for 39B, which is basically anything that's above the pad surface is now gone. To launch a launch vehicle, you roll out with what you need, and it's a simple hookup at the launch pad. When we rolled out Shuttle, we used to spend about 30 days at the launch pad preparing the vehicle for flight. Now it's about a week to hook up the mobile launcher to the launch pad, and then we're good to go. So it's a pretty innovative way to allow us to get a little bit more efficient at the launch pad, and it helps reduce risk. We've also undergone a lot of of changes to the crawler transporter. The overall, the basic way this system makes it out to the launch pad is this. It doesn't look very big here, but it's a giant truck, maybe for lack of a better term. What's that? You saw it? Okay, so you saw how big it is. They tell you each one of these links weighs 2,000 pounds, 1 ton of the track. Yeah, so all together, for rolling out for shuttle is about 16 million pounds out to the launch pad with fully loaded vehicle. I think between the mobile launcher and the space launch system, it's about 18 to 20 million pounds. So we had to make some significant upgrades. In the crawler, again, these are all 50 years old. They're built for Apollo. Built well, apparently, because again, it's 50 years old and maintained well. They were actually still running, but we had to rebuild them to allow them to deal with the heavier weight of space launch system. And we also actually had to upgrade the crawler pathway. Looks the same, but we actually had to kind of reinforce certain areas. There are times here in Florida it rains, and there were times where, some parts of the crawler pathway actually got a little wet, and we were unable to transit those areas. So now we've done some upgrades that allow us to deal with heavier weights and allow us to, again, do the work we're doing for SLS. So, from a partnership perspective, in 2010, we knew the shuttle program was winding down. We had a lot of facilities here at Kennedy Space Center and a lot of capabilities here that we knew were not going to be utilized to the extent that they were under the shuttle program. So our center management decided that we needed to create a front door to the center. That's our office, Center Planning and Development. And what we have done since that point in time is work with commercial companies, both U.S. and foreign, to allow them to utilize different aspects of Kennedy Space Center capabilities. So we're the front door of that. To get us to the point where we are now, first thing we had to do was lay out a plan. So if any of you are city planners, there's usually a master plan that most cities or entities have that kind of focus on development, how you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be. So we did that. We developed a master plan for infrastructure and land use and real estate kind of strategies as a part of that. And that allowed us to establish our partnerships here at Kennedy Space Center. So that formed the basis for doing what we're doing now. So we developed, it was a 20-year master plan. It was approved in 2014, and we've been working to that as we knew it was kind of taking shape. As we do the agreements, we have to hand them off for implementation. So we're business development, and then we hand them off to the folks that actually implement the agreements. So there's an organization here at Kennedy called Spaceport Integration that actually implements the agreements. So they manage the partners once they're here on site. So here are our core strategies for the master plan. Our number one strategy was supporting the NASA missions and programs. That's why Kennedy Space Center is here, is to ensure that the work that we're doing meets the NASA vision, mission, and goals. So to that end, we had to make sure that anything we did from a planning perspective took into account and enabled our NASA missions and the programs that are here at the Space Center. When we first put this plan together, it was the second goal was actually develop a multi-user spaceport. And I'll tell you why we think we're successful in just a second. So we've changed that now to enhance the multi-user spaceport by bringing in more customers and more partners here to the center to allow work to happen. Going leaner and greener is partly the what you're thinking of with environmental and things like that. But in the era of shrinking government budgets or flat government budgets, we had to learn to do more with the budgets we had. So that's the leaner part of this. And then the last part of the strategy was divest without diminish. So what does that mean, right? So we had a lot of capabilities here that we no longer needed or were underutilized. We, as KSC and NASA, could not afford to keep maintaining those, but we didn't want to tear them down. That's just a waste of money and a waste of capability. So we came up with the concept of divest without diminish. So what we have done, you'll see in the partnerships I'll talk about in the next few slides, is we have provided capabilities to commercial companies and other governmental organizations to utilize the excess capacity that we had here. We're no longer responsible for operations and maintenance, which saves us money. We have divested effectively of the responsibility of those facilities, but we have not diminished our capacity and capability here at the center. It's a very innovative thought process to do that, and we've been very successful at getting to that point. Here's just a brief kind of an overhead slide of the number of partnerships, number of commercial folks that we're working with and other governmental organizations. It's a lot. I'm not going to go through all these, so don't worry. I know you want to get to Atlantis. That's the main reason you're here, and I understand. But we were doing a lot of different things with a lot of different organizations here at Kennedy that really has helped us diversify and support things like technology transfer and an enablement of commercial space and commercial space flight and things like that. So start off with our Keystone partnership here, which was with Boeing for CST-100. So you saw the pictures of the interior of the spacecraft. What we did is we took what was at one time Orbiter Processing Facility Bay 3. So that's one of the 3 bays where we processed our orbiters. Atlantis had been there a few times, and other space shuttles as well. And developed a partnership actually with the state of Florida in partnership with Boeing to allow use of that bay for manufacture of the CST-100. So that was a kind of a milestone. It was a huge milestone for us as a center because that's the first major partnership we had, and we were able to successfully do that in a way that met commercial needs. And I'll explain what that means in just a second. But we had to, like anything government-wise, we have to do a competition. We can't just, hey, you're great, let's pick you. So we have a notice of availability for capabilities that we have that we have more than one or two. So we had 3 OPF bays that counted. We could do a notice of availability, and Space Florida was the first one through the door, which is our state economic development agency for aerospace and space. And they proposed to us to allow use of that facility along with another 3-story office building that we didn't have need for, to work to create an incentive package for Boeing to select Florida as a place to build CST-100. So Florida, we participated in by making the capability available. The state of Florida actually provided the incentives because we as NASA can't do that. We have capabilities, the state has the incentives, that's how that works, and so we kind of stay, it's a nice separation of duties in that regard. We, again, selected them. It's a 15-year with a 5-year extensible property agreement, so it can be a total of 20 years. Key part of this is we have minimal NASA oversight. So one of the things you always hear about government folks is they like to be involved in stuff, and we took a very conscious effort for these kind of partnerships where the partner is in a self-contained facility to very minimally be involved with their day-to-day activities. And from the feedback we're getting, it's been very successful. They completely rebuilt OPF Bay 3, turned it into a commercial crew cargo and processing facility, and they did that without any real help from us. I mean, we provided advice because we knew the building and helped them to manage certain things, but they did, between Space Florida and Boeing, rebuilt the interior of that building on their own. So pretty neat accomplishment there. So the construction is complete and operations are underway inside the facility now. So again, at least one of the pictures you saw from CST-100 was the actual pressure vessel, we call it, being manufactured inside the facility. Right now, the first flight is actually planned for mid next year, so come back and watch. It's going to be pretty exciting. SpaceX, our second major partnership here. So what's Kennedy Space Center known for? Launching stuff, right? That's what we've been doing for 60 plus years. And so the thought of, we had 2 launch pads, and one of them we did not need for Space Launch System. We were able to, with the planning into 2030 timeframe, all the work and launches we needed to do for SLS were satisfied with the capabilities of 39B. And so to that end, we said, all right, we've got an available launch pad, let's see who needs to use it. So we had a slightly different instrument there because we only had one. Remember, it's a competition thing. So we developed a process called an announcement for proposals, where we said, hey, we got a launch pad available. Who wants it? Who can use it? How are you going to use it? And tell us when you're going to use it. So We had two companies come to us. We ended up selecting SpaceX for use of 39A, and they planned and have been using it for Falcon cargo. They now are going to start launching from Launch Complex 40N, which is the other launch pad they have here, and they're going to finish the modification work on 39A to allow for launch of Falcon Heavy, which is basically 3 of those strapped together for a launch. And I think they're, don't quote me on this, you can look it up, don't look on their website. I think it's about 60 metric tons to low Earth orbit. So it's a pretty big launch vehicle. And they're planning on launching that early next year for the first time. And then as a part of that, they're also finishing the modifications of the access tower here to allow their crews to get on their spacecraft. Their crew access point was at a different height than it was for shuttle, so they had to add to the capability that we had there. Again, minimal NASA oversight on a 20-year property agreement. They've come in, they've rebuilt that launch pad. They've asked us for help when we needed it. Like, hey, this thing is here, what is this? You know, kind of, I mean, it's not that bad. It's me talking. But, you know, they did get some technical help from us on certain pad systems, which, you know, helped them to rebuild it. And completed construction, and we flew for the first time off of 39A for SpaceX in February of this year. So the neat thing, when you're talking all the, you know, the neat accomplishments of 39A, so that launch pad hosted the first flight to the moon, first flight of space shuttle, and now our first commercial flight. And so it's some pretty neat accomplishments. Space Florida, I'm going to talk about them a little bit, and we've done a lot with Space Florida in different ways. So again, Space Florida is an economic development agency for the state for aerospace and space. They have provided capabilities here at the Space Center for a long period of time. In late 90s, early 2000s, they built the Space and Life Sciences Lab to help support the International Space Station and the experiments that are going to ISS. A lot of researchers did a lot of good work in there as a part of that activity. As we moved into a more operational phase in the Center for Advancement in Science and Space, CASES, was developed, and so we actually, because of the work, our diminishing work from a NASA perspective, we ended up turning that building back to Space Florida, and they are allowing use of that facility to researchers and all that to provide, with CASES, you know, capabilities to get experiments to the International Space Station. Again, I mentioned OPF Bay 3. There you can see it with an orbiter still in the bay. And again, we worked with Space Florida to make that capability available to Boeing. We've also turned over our shuttle landing facility. So when we got done flying shuttle, we didn't need to land anything here. And this along with the launch pad and our 3 orbiter processing facility bays are the kind of keystone of our divest without diminish. We had no need for the shuttle landing facility runway. It's 3 miles long, 300 feet wide, about 100 meters wide. And so it is capability is really unmatched throughout the world. But we didn't have money to maintain it. So Space Florida, we again did a competition for the runway. Hey, we got a giant runway, who wants to operate it? Space Florida came in and said, hey, we can do something with that. So when we developed the agreement for this, not only are they doing the operations and maintenance of the runway, but about 4,000 acres of land around the runway we have turned over to them for development. So they can build hangars, they can build manufacturing capability. Recently, they announced a company called Skytran that is wanting to actually develop a people mover system that would work in cities. And they're going to do that development work here. So it's a pretty exciting time for, you know, again, it's, you know, what does a people mover have to do with aerospace? Well, interestingly enough, Ames Research Center is supplying software and control systems to this people mover that we have used in robots. And that will help ensure that this system that's being developed is safe for people to get on and be, you know, transported around the city. So again, it's an example of technology transfer from a NASA perspective. So I think I've been through all these. Oh, the one thing I didn't mention is the operations and checkout facility high bay. I showed you the picture of the Orion spacecraft. The state of Florida, in about the late 90s, early 2000s, as part of the, because Lockheed Martin did a similar kind of thing and said, all right, we are wanting to manufacture Orion. Who wants to host us? And so the state of Florida, again, in partnership with us, put in a bid effectively to have Orion program move here for the manufacturing. They won that. They ended up investing $35 million into the operations and checkout facility, High Bay, to turn that into what was an old, dank Apollo era processing facility into a modern, brand new processing facility for Orion. So again, it's been a good partnership there, and so a lot of exciting things happening in that regard. So one of our more recent entrants to the Space Center is a company called Blue Origin. You may have heard of Amazon, right? And so Jeff Bezos, this is his baby company to create the capability to fly astronauts and cargo to space. And so again, the competition happens. The state of Florida proposed on it. We had land here that we could make available, and so they are now almost done building, a 750,000 square foot manufacturing facility to build the New Glenn launch vehicle here at Kennedy Space Center. So it's exciting for us for a couple of reasons. One is we get another cool manufacturing capability here, but it's the first time actually, we've done obviously a lot of launches out of the state of Florida and from Kennedy Space Center, but we've never manufactured a launch vehicle here. Right? Little known fact. So all those things are manufactured elsewhere. Now we've got a launch vehicle actually being manufactured here and at the Kennedy Space Center. So it's really, really pretty neat. So here you see the artist rendition. And actually, if you drive by there, have the opportunity, I don't know if the bus took you by there or not, it pretty much looks like that now. So huge, right? So they're pretty well done. They plan on being in there in the next week or two with, starting to host people in there, starting to do work. So it's been a pretty exciting time for us. So they plan on doing their first launch from Space Launch Complex 36, which is actually on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, in about the 2020 timeframe. So not only are they doing this work on this building, they're actually building a launch pad at the same time. So pretty good time. So here, we're proud of this. This is we call it our rocket garden. There's a rocket garden outside the door here, which you'll walk through. But this is the suite of space launch vehicles that we are currently hosting or plan to host here at Kennedy Space Center. So anywhere from a space launch system to Orbital ATK with the launcher they're developing, to Blue with their New Glenn launch vehicle, SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, and then Orbital ATK again, and a couple of we're trying to get some small launcher vehicles to come and launch from here. So we figured we'd include them on our rocket garden, and maybe that one will come. So, but it's a testament to the work we've done here at Kennedy to develop a multi-user spaceport. So you can see between us and the Air Force Station, we are that. And I like to kind of finish it up with let me finish this up and then I'll give you the kind of the takeaway for us. So I mentioned the Orbital ATK launcher. We did that with another announcement for proposals because the BAB is actually technically an underutilized facility. We have 4 high bays in there, only 2 are required for space launch system. So we made one available for a commercial company. Orbital came, won that competition, and is now doing design work to be prepared, not only do work inside the bay, but they're going to take one of our old shuttle mobile launch platforms and turn that into the launch platform for their next generation launcher. And so we're working with them to finish all the terms and conditions to allow that. That's going to be a little bit more complicated because we're doing work with solid rocket motors inside the facility. They're going to bring solid rocket motors in. So there are a lot of hazardous kind of activities we have to work through, but I know we're going to get there. So we're finishing all that negotiation right now. I mentioned the notice of availability open. We opened the last one up in June of 2016. It ends June of next year. We'll follow that on with another 2-year notice of availability, so don't worry if you miss your opportunity here. There will be another one open. But here are the land uses that we're looking for partners to come in with us and work with us on. Anywhere from vertical launch to research and development to renewable energy, payload processing, things like that. So aerospace related activities is really what we're looking for here. So we've got actually several proposals that we're working through right now. And as we get done with those, we'll be able to make announcements on those. They're pretty exciting and are significant enhancements to the multi-user spaceport that we have here. Key part of any of this is we have currently 144,000 acres that are U.S. government property here. We retain all, ownership of the land, but when companies come in and build a capability, that is theirs. So the improvements to the land belong to the companies that we deal with and partner with. So it allows them to build the kind of capabilities they need and have that be their own and not be ours. So I'll finish with this. When I told you that we are a multi-user spaceport, and I like to kind of give this statistic. In the history of human spaceflight, only 3 countries have ever flown humans to space: United States, Russia, and China. Here at Kennedy Space Center today, we have 4 different companies working on human spaceflight programs. SpaceX with the Dragon, Boeing, CST-100, Lockheed Martin with the Orion, and now Blue Origin with their New Glenn launch vehicle. So one of our goals, which we kind of set out for ourselves when we put the master plan together, was to become that Silicon Valley of space. We're there, and we're excited about it. And we're glad we're able to share that with you today. And again, I know you've seen as you've been driving around the different capabilities we've got here. We're willing to add more as we need more. And excited to work with whomever wants to work with us on those kinds of things. So I appreciate your time today. I know it's late in the day, and you have a very important date with Atlantis coming up right now. So I will tell you that I cry every time I go in there, because it is one of the most amazing. If you love space, it touches you, because it's a really great presentation. I'm probably overselling it now. You're going to think that for a minute.